What is up, everyone? We're back again with another college hoops preview, Run Pure Sports. We did the Big East last night, ACC last week. We are back with another mega conference, the Big Ten, 18 teams now. We're not going to run through all the changes in the league. We'll get to that as we get to the team-by-team stuff. If you're new with college hoops starting in a couple weeks, you can join us over at runpuresports.com. Do playbooks, projections, core plays for every main slate of the season. We got all the other sports as well. NBA started last night, first big slate tonight. UFC pay-per-view this weekend, and obviously NFL and college football rolling along, NHL going too. So we had 18 teams, Gav. The ACC was a bit hectic when we did it, but I feel like we're settled in here now with show number 3. How you doing?
Good, man. Yeah, it's interesting conference. I mean, definitely the flattest of the power conferences. There's a multitude of teams that if anybody says they're going to win it, I wouldn't say you're out of your mind. I think the largest spread on Bar Torvik for any Big Ten game is 9.6 points. So I think that kind of gives you an idea. There's 18 teams and it's that close. Yeah, let's start sorting it out. We got plenty of them to get through.
Yeah, I think especially with this conference, if you have takes that are different than, just KenPom, Torvik, I think you kind of lean into them early because these teams are so bunched up. I mean, all 18 teams are between 10 and 75 on KenPom. That's I think that's a way to go early. But yeah, let's get into it. We got 18 teams. We start with Illinois coming off an excellent year, 29-9. They end up 10th at KenPom under Brad Underwood, 14-6 in conference with a third highest offensive efficiency overall. But as you see here on the sheet, Gav, major losses. Terry Shannon's gone, Damask is gone, and they had 6 guys transfer. I was kind of shocked that so many guys left this team. It's a great offensive team. The program's in a really good spot. Any thoughts on that? And then thoughts on the incoming massive group of newcomers here?
Yeah, it was a fair amount, but after the core 3 of Shannon, Damask, and Hawkins, it's like Luke Goody, okay, Sincere Harris sat out basically the whole season. Dane Danger barely played. Gary A was useful. Justin Hartman was like, okay, you're not really losing a ton magnitude wise outside of obviously those 3. But yeah, it was an incredible year for him. Behind those 3, I think really the discussion for this team and how you view this team really centers around what you think of Kasparas Yakinsionis, this Lithuanian frosh. It's probably, in that group of 2 to 3 overseas frosh who, forewent playing pro ball overseas. They might be getting more money NIL wise. He was like one of the youngest players ever on a premier European club, which, is kind of at least gives you a good sense of just where he's at kind of skill wise. He's basically a 6'5" point guard, an elite facilitator, a pick and roll tear. If the shot comes along, I mean, I've seen this guy mocked as high as like the top 10, like mid single digits. Seen others, late first round, everything in between, but he's really where it starts because he's kind of the question mark and the upside. I tend to be more favorable. I don't want to be late on him, but kind of after that, it's, Kylan Boswell from Arizona, really strong 2-way defender, point guard, shot threes well, but it's kind of like the Tyrese Proctor, reclass and your quote unquote sophomore leap, you're still freshman age. So I could see flop lag, him having a good year. Ty Rogers, your kind of defensive Swiss Army knife. Ben Richis is interesting. Evansville transfer, first year in D1, played extremely well, very high O rating, fell off against Tier AB. Then you got Trey White. Trey White's kind of interesting, probably the best 2-way of the wings on their team. Louisville and SC played for kind of 2 shitty programs, but it's a guy whose O rating is actually inverse. It goes up with the better competition he plays. I think that kind of explains Trey White in a nutshell. He gets up kind of when the team is good, and the team wasn't ever good last 2 years. So really starts around there, then throw in kind of the upside of a Will Riley, a reclass kind of 6'8". I've seen him listed at 6'6", 6'8", so who knows at this point, but so much interesting upside on this team. Some of these guys have to pop.
Yeah, lots of unknowns and unproven players that are going to have big roles on this team in a big time conference. I think that this team specifically has a wider range of outcomes than a lot of the ones that we'll talk about tonight. Yeah, Boswell comes home. He was born in Champaign. I always think that's kind of cool. Should get a boost in minutes. He was like 26, 27 last year. I wouldn't be shocked if he's 30 plus here. Um, and yeah, you didn't mention Ivisic, the twin brother of the 7-footer from Kentucky last year. Probably going to start at the 5 from day one. This team is just so much younger than last year, which was a bunch of grad transfers, really carrying the weight. So I'm not exactly sure what to think about this team. Torvik's got them 20th, Ken Palm 23rd, picked second, I believe, on Ken Palm in the conference. I think that's a tad high just because of all the unknowns coming in. Where are you on them? They do have a pretty tough non-conference. They play Wednesday, November 20th, neutral against Bama. That'll be fun with two teams that really like to run. They've got a home against Tennessee and a neutral against Missouri. Also Arkansas at home as well.
Yeah, they usually play a good non-con. I mean, Ivisic is interesting. He's the older brother, I believe, of Big Z. So he is a little bit older. He's not a true Frosh, if I'm not mistaken. He kind of has a similar skill set. You bring in kind of a shooter like Kerry Booth. I think he's the kid of one of the Celtics GMs or whatever. So, trust the pedigree that he can shoot threes. I just think there is a lot of question marks on this team, no doubt. But I think the upside of this team is scary. Like, it's like top 5 offense good. Like, this could Underwood just abandoned defense last year. Really became an offensive minded team, and it was kind of unique in their booty ball. But man, there's so much talent on this team. They're just young, so it might not be early, but I would not be surprised to look up by the end of the conference, and they might not even be in first place, but Illinois is the Big Ten team that nobody wants to see in the tournament.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I really worry defensively, especially at the 3, 4, 5 spots with this roster. A lot of the Euros that come over, even the ones that hit in the NBA, none are really known for their defense. And this team, like you said, was 80th in adjusted defensive efficiency last year. So yeah, I'm with you. Probably a team that I'll be iffy on early and probably fade a bit early as they're going to take some time to gel. I mean, losing Terry Shannon, Damask, and Hawkins, 3 of the biggest losses in the entire conference. Any last words here on Illinois?
No, I think they have a little defensive upside. You can run out of Boswell, Rogers, Trey White trio. So I think there's so much options. That's where I'm at with them. I like them.
Yep. All right, let's keep it moving. Really intriguing team here with Indiana. After they struggled to meet expectations last year, 19-14, but 91st at Ken Palm. Coming into this year at Ken Palm, that would be 18th in the conference, Gav, if they ended the year 91st. They went 10-10 in conference, and they opened up the pocketbooks this offseason. They went and got Miles Rice from Wazoo, Umar Ballo from Zona, and Carlisle from Stanford. The one big loss being Kalel Ware, lottery pick, was absolutely awesome last year. And then the other losses like Xavier Johnson, CJ Gunn, I would argue addition by subtraction. What do you think about the offseason moves here, Gav?
Yeah, it's tough replacing a guy like Ware, but I think I just got to the point with the Xavier Johnson that, yeah, like the tools and the skills are there, but he's just not a winning component of basketball, even when he's on the floor, and he couldn't stay on the floor. This team was in such bad shape. Like, Gabe Cupps was starting at point guard, and Trey Galloway was their go-to guard option. Trey Galloway's the 5th option on this team. He's basically just going to be the wind sprinter, kind of wing defender. You got to start with Umar Ballo. I mean, for my money, one of the best 5 big men in the country, maybe 3. The guy just averaged a double-double. Like, I think he was co-Pac-12 Player of the Year with Caleb Love, or at least first team 2 years in a row. But it's just been mega productive everywhere he's been. Woodson's been a heavy post-up guy every year. Part of that is having TJD, Kalel Ware back-to-back years. But Yeah, just an absolute machine. And watching their scrimmage, like they were playing Renault a little bit more outside on the perimeter. Like it's going to feature another 28-minute role for Ballo. But yeah, I love Miles Rice, man. Nobody got to see this guy because he played for kind of a Washington State team that overshot their expectations, but he was so good. He was a freshman All-American. If you want a crazy story, go look up his kind of life story and how he got here. Like this guy's coming off of cancer like a couple of years ago. So there's potential where he really hasn't even kind of fully started to get on his development arc. And the upside would be crazy. You know, he was more score first last year, but the control he takes, being a two-way guy, it's something that's so necessary for them to have after having to hurt Xavier Johnson for the last couple of years. So that's my ramble there. But you also bring back an Mbako, high pedigree, wing forward. You bring in a Kalen Carlisle, who's kind of a six-man microwave scorer. Bring in a Luke Goody from spacing from Illinois, like we just said. It is the best on-paper talent team in the conference, I think, with a bullet. I don't even think that's in a discussion. It's one of the best top sixes in the country. The question becomes, what do you do with Mike Woodson?
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. I was actually looking through a couple of the new tools on evanmia.com, and he has what's called like a roster strength rating, which doesn't, bring in coaching or schedule or anything like that. And he's got in Indiana 8th overall in that. So, that just speaks to just the pure talent that is on this roster. Like you said, Mbako, top 10 recruit last year, renewed, awesome last season as the second fiddle to Ware, good passer at the 4. Ballo, man, like my big thing with him is it was always at least mildly frustrating, right? That he would play 24, 25 minutes. He averaged 26 a game last year. A note that I have on him, Gav, the last 2 years under Woodson, TJD 34.5 minutes per game. Kalel Ware 32.2 for his starting 5. Any bump in minutes for Ballo is going to be massive because he's a 1.17 fantasy point per minute guy. The counting stats for him are just going to be incredible if he's able to push past the 26 minutes per game.
Yeah, the tempo won't fall off from Arizona to Indiana. They're still going to push it relatively decently. Zona was kind of in a unique situation where they have the decent backup overseas bigs, but they also had like the death lineup where they were a top 10 defense. They could play Kashad Johnson at the 5. I think that's kind of what ate into his minutes. But yeah, a minute bump is kind of scary to think what he could do in this conference. I think he's probably the best big in the conference with pretty safely.
Yeah, I would say so too. But like you said, the question marks with this team are basically the coaching and the style of play. 351st in 3-point attempts, and they were 255th in 3-point percentage. That will likely increase with this new roster, bringing in Carlisle, Goody, guys like that.
Let me run with that for a sec. Like, I think that would you want to shoot a bunch of 3-pointers with the guys they had last year? Like the issue with Woodson has always been like lineup construction as well. You don't bring in a backup point guard for an oft injured Xavier Johnson. It rears its head. You don't bring in any shooters. It rears its head. At least you got the construction part right. I mean, this team's on paper. I'm literally ready to just wave my hand and just say, screw Mike Woodson. I'm just betting him to win the conference at like 8-1 or whatever it is. The upside is just, I think, too high.
Like, it's pretty hard for him to fuck this up, right?
Yeah. You got to really, like now Woodson's gone down in KenPom every year, basically, as a coach. So it's not like he's a great coach, but you got to be an astronomically bad coach for this team not to at least finish towards the top of the conference.
Yeah, I think they do have the ceiling to absolutely win this conference. Any last words here?
No, I think if you ask me who wins the Big Ten, I don't know if I could say Indiana more often than not, but if you ask me which team from this conference makes the Final Four, I'm probably in on Indiana at that point.
Yeah, last thing, we didn't mention Bryson Tucker, number 20 overall recruit. It's a talented roster, but he probably gives some Trey Galloway, Mbako in insurance on the wing.
He's going to be a mid-range assassin, yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to Iowa. 19-15 last year. They end up 57th at KenPom, 10-10 in conference. just like last year, I think this conference is gonna be really balanced overall. They lose to Tony Perkins, who, man, he had a solid year for them last year. Ben Crickey's gone. They bring in not much. Felwell from Morehead State, Traore from Manhattan. What do you think about the offseason changes for Iowa?
Yeah, I mean, Tony Perkins' year was incredible, partly due to the fact that he's surrounded by shooters at all times. That helps. And they won't have that shot creation this year. But they still bring back Peyton Sanfort, who flirted with the draft, right? Still bring back an Owen Freeman, who's kind of one of the higher upside bigs in the Big Ten. Felwell, Moorhead is like the totally opposite tempo, first of all, as Iowa. So it's a little bit funky of a fit. But, Ironman, high assist point guard, good spot up, catch and shoot numbers, good fit. I don't have a ton about this team. We're trying to save some time. Like, it's going to be your typical Iowa team. It'll probably be top 25 in offense, and it'll be outside the top 100 in defense. They'll play fast and be a DFS gold mine.
Yeah, top 20 pace, top 20 offense, 168th and 157th in defensive efficiency the last 2 years. Sanford, all conference for sure. Made the jump last year with a bump in minutes up over 30. That's basically all he needed, right? Was the extra minutes. 121.5 O rating for Sanford, 91% free throw shooter. So, the 40% from three on 250 attempts checks out. That's over 7 a game. 1.04 fantasy point per minute for Sanford. Absolute beast. Did want to mention Brock Harding. We're going to have him later on our breakout sheet. Steps into a much larger role, probably gets handed the point guard keys. Very limited run last year, but Gav had a 38% assist rate in his playing time. That would have been top 12 nationally. So that's definitely something to note because, like you said, he's surrounded with elite perimeter shooters, Dix, Sanford, and company. For comparison purposes, that assist rate would be near guys like Braden Smith, Isaiah Stevens, Ray J. Dennis, the best of the best. Obviously, that's probably not going to hold, but it's good to see that as like a jump off point. Any last thoughts here?
No, yeah, I think they'll probably run the dual point guard with Harden and Thelwell. We saw Dix start to emerge kind of as the season went on, and he got a larger role. So he probably peaks up into the double digits. No, I think safely. I project them safely to be kind of in the middle of the conference. Nowhere near the ceiling to be towards the top. Way better floor than most of the teams below them. Yeah,
agreed. Dix shot 42% from three last year, top 100 nationally. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to the Terps. Maryland. They ended last season 16-17, 62nd at Ken Pom, 7-13 in conference. 2 big losses here. Obviously, Jameer Young, lead point guard, and Dante Scott finally runs out of eligibility after what felt like year 17 at Maryland. But some interesting additions here for Kevin Willard, Gav. They bring in Derek Queen, 5-star big man, and Jacoby Gillespie from Belmont and Selton Gell from South Florida. You can really tell that he was very discouraged by their 3-point shooting last year, as he should be. 347th nationally in 3-point percentage. Goes into the portal and brings in 2 guys who shot 40% from 3 last year. What do you think about the offseason for Maryland?
Yeah, their issue last year was outside of the core 3, Jameer Young, Julian Reese, Donta Scott, who Reese and Donta were, I would say, fine. They weren't even good, honestly. There was nothing role player wise on this team last year. Basically, they all just sucked, including a Jamie Kaiser, including Jahari Long. So that's what's fixed and addressed is the shot making and the depth. Gillespie coming over from Belmont, I don't know. He's getting a lot of pub for being a potential kind of nobody saw it coming stud in the conference. I think he's an upside shot creator. He lives at the rim, which is a lot easier to do when you're not in the Big Ten. Selton Miguel was the 6-man microwave scorer for a really potent, offensive, analytically minded South Florida team. Shot 39% from 3 on 182 attempts, but was woefully inefficient inside the arc. We didn't mention Rodney Rice, right? I know this probably this might be the tougher part for you, but this is a guy. This is not like a high upside bench guard from Virginia Tech. Like, I guess basically played a half year and then no played like a couple games and then went into the portal or whatever it was. But we
He
haven't
left right
seen him in
before the
like
season last year. Yeah.
he's basically been out of college basketball for like almost 2 years, basically. I
Yeah.
think so. He also provides a little bit of upside, kind of, insurance swing. Queen's a volume rebounder, good feel for the game, good face-up game, a little bit of playmaking, kind of almost sounds Renault-ish like to me in a way. There's going to be questions of how do you play Queen and Julian Reese together. But yeah, this should be another smash year for Reese. And kind of after that, it could get pretty dicey any given game.
Yeah, Rice is a DeMatha guy. I think he had some family issues, went back home. But yeah, he was supposed to be a high impact guy for the Hokies last year. So I think he'll be a good bench piece here. And they're probably going to need it. Like, yeah, this team doesn't have much depth outside of the starting five. Geronimo, Rice, I think, are going to be their top two. Like you said, Jahari Long didn't really give him much last year. I do like the additions. Like, this team is going to defend. Willard has done really well. So this is year 3 at Maryland, 32nd and 14th in adjusted defensive efficiency since he's been there. So this team's going to guard their ass off. Having Reese and Queen inside, it's going to be tough to score on them at the rim. Queen, from everything I've read, is an excellent passer for his size and position. So hopefully they'll be able to play that 2 big lineup because those are the 2 best players. Julian Reese, obviously their best player, 1.01 fantasy point per minute last year, top 100 rebound and block rates. The big thing for him, Gav, was playing 32 minutes a game. For us in DFS, was really good at getting the line, 17th highest free throw rate last year. So yeah, I think the biggest question here is, how does Willard play Reese and Queen together? Can Deshaun Harris-Smith come back after just a horrendous offensive season for him? After coming in like very highly touted, he just could never get it going. You could tell that it was weighing on him. Willard kept running him out there. So hopefully he had a good offseason because they're definitely going to need him at the 2-3 with Gillespie and Miguel. But it's good to see that they added shooting in the offseason because that was clearly their biggest weakness last year.
Yeah, they're also terrible away from their arena. I don't think they won a road Big Ten game all year, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think, 42-37, I think that's pretty safely, where they'll end up. It's probably going to be a team, on the bubble. And if they have kind of enough shot making to push them over, they'll be, a low double-digit seed at large, kind of in the back end. Yeah, not a team I'm super high on, but at least should improve from last year for sure.
Yeah. Defense is going to be good, and they play slow, outside the top 200 in tempo in both years under Willard. So not the best DFS team. It's usually Julian Reese or pass for us. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to Michigan. The bottom falls out for Michigan last year after the absolute disaster hire of Juwan Howard just bottomed out, going 8-24. They finished the year 128th at Ken Palm Gap, 3-17 in conference. They bring in Dusty May from FAU, who brings over Vlad Golden with him. They have a bunch leaving. Doug McDaniel, Terrace Reed transfer out, and was gone. Terrence Williams gone. But he brings in, I think, arguably the best group of talent outside of Indiana in the transfer portal overall, with Vlad Golden, Roddy Gale, Trey Donaldson, who played well at Auburn in like a split role, Danny Wolf from Yale, Sam Walters, and Reuben Jones. That those 6, if you put them on a couple of the teams that we talked about yesterday in the Big East, would not be a basement team. What do you think about the offseason moves for Michigan here?
Yeah, when Juwan Howard inherited John Beilein's players, he looked great. As soon as he had to build, his own program for a couple of years, it was just a complete dumpster fire. Dusty May's kind of one of the, trendier young coaches in the sport for sure. Obviously, his success at FAU. The pieces that he brought in definitely fit what he wants to do, right? He wants to have at least 3, if not 4 guards on the floor who can dribble, pass, and shoot, who have a little bit of creation ability. Any given guy can put pressure on the rim, kick the ball out, start forcing rotations, and they can all shoot. So I think on the surface, like, they have that with the Donaldson, Roddy Gale, and Amari Burnett combo, right? Who is the dude out of those 3? Like, everything's pointing to Roddy Gale. Roddy Gale was not that great last year.
No.
He's the highest upside guard, but was a 28% three-point shooter. Like, if the range doesn't improve, then he's not going to be able to be kind of the go-to guy late, which would put Danny Wolf in the spot, who's getting a ton of pub. He's a guy comes over from Yale. Another one of these guys who's from the Ivy League, whose O ratings fall off against tier A and B compared to the season-long race when you're playing a bunch of the Northeast cupcakes. But Vlad Golden is going to be a legit, defending big. His post-up rate offensively and defensively, albeit in a mid-major conference, we're like both above the 90th percentile efficiency-wise. He's legit. Ruben Jones is a great North Texas transfer. Had the best net BPR and the best defensive BPR on Evan Mia from North Texas. Also goes to a team from 360th in tempo to, likely a team inside the top 50, given Dusty May's history. So he's another one of those guards. And then you bring in kind of a stretch like a Sam Walters to be a better version of a Will Shetter, who was forced into 18 minutes a game last year. That's how bad Michigan was when Will Shetter's playing 18 minutes a game.
Will Shetter, 18 minutes a game. That is not going to happen this year. Hopefully. Yeah, Sam Walters, I like a good bit to break out here. 6'10", stretch big, like you said. Nearly 9 3-point attempts per 40 as a Frosh with an O rating over 120, shot 39.4%. I think he's a winning piece. I like that. And I like his fit with the rest of this team. Golden, he's going to play about 25 minutes and be very, very efficient when he is on the court. He did bump from 20.9 to 25 minutes last year, Gav. That was a huge jump for him DFS-wise as a 1.15 fantasy point per minute guy. This is, if you pull up his KenPom page, it's all red. Red is good on KenPom. It means you have got nationally ranked stats, O rating, effective field goal percentage, top 12 in true shooting, top 75 block percentage, top 40 in fouls drawn, 28th best 2-point percentage in the country. Love this pickup. I'm glad that he was able to bring him over with him. Yeah. And then like Gale, I agree. Highest pedigree, probably highest upside, but was not good. 28% from 3, like you said. I really like Trey Donaldson. Was kind of mired in a 50% role at Auburn. Pretty strict timeshare because Auburn was 7th nationally in bench minutes. We'll talk about that next week. Dusty May, Gavin, relied heavily on his guards, like you said, at FAU. I think Donaldson could see the biggest jump in minutes of anyone on this team. He had good rates last year, 101st nationally in assist rate, didn't turn the ball over, has shot north of 40% from 3 in both seasons at Auburn. I think Donaldson is a really good pickup. Anything else here on Michigan? Torvik?
Donaldson just got Bruce Pearled, I agree that he's the biggest breakout, not as much Sam Walters, because I can guarantee Donaldson's role is going to be a 28-minute-a-game role. I don't know if Sam Walters is going to get that with Danny Wolf, but I think a good initial kind of first year for Dusty May, stop the bleeding of previous years, get the reputation and kind of the prestige of the program back on the right track. Then you can start going after kind of the high major recruits. Yeah,
I was just peeking at their non-con. First Sunday of the season, they play Wake Forest in Greensboro. That'll be a good game. They play TCU, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. So pretty tough non-con. Oh, and Virginia Tech. So 5 at least, top 100 opponents in non-con. We should know pretty early what Michigan is going to do with this new roster. Michigan State, Sparty, 20-15 last year. 16th at KenPom. They didn't feel like the 16th best team. I feel like Ken Pom always has them higher ranked than anyone else. I think he actually got, it seems like he's overcorrected that. He's got them coming in at 35th this year. Big turnover for them. They lose kind of their core from the previous era in Tyson Walker, Hogard, Malik Hall. And yeah, that was a core that never really quite lived up to the hype. They maxed out at 11 conference wins. They maxed out as a 7 seed, which under Izzo for Sparty, that's just not going to cut it. This current roster's got 7 top 50 guys, a top 10 guy, and Xavier Booker. It's a young team, but it's a super talented team. And I kind of feel like it's a fresh start for Izzo and this program. Just, you kind of clean the slate from guys that didn't really live up to the hype that people thought. I mean, 2 years ago, this was the preseason #1 team in the country.
Yeah, last year we thought that they were going to be the team. That was kind of when everyone was like, are they actually going to be the ones to unseat Purdue? And God, yeah, they had a top 10 defense. I don't know how. Yeah, kind of like you said, I was ready to be much lower on Michigan State than kind of consensus, and then Ken Pom came in at 35th, and I was like, wow, okay, that might even be kind of lower than I would have thought that they would be at. Yeah, just basically the issue with last year was just the lack of 3-point punch. Absolutely killed spacing. It killed Hogard's driving lanes. It allowed teams to shadow Tyson Walker with 2 guys. Tyson Walker and Jordan Akins were the only 2 guys on the team with more than 83s on the season. Now, Trey Holloman was kind of the best shooter percentage-wise, 42.5% on exactly 80. So maybe I kind of cheated that data a little bit. But, yeah, he's in a huge breakout role opportunity right here. Jeremy Fears is a highly regarded point guard and like someone that's been billed as like a true point guard, like could lead the conference in assists this year. I don't think that's out of the equation. It should have a little bit more 3-point punch when you have a Holloman in a full-time role, when you have an Akins, when you have no choice but to play more Xavier Booker this year, and then you bring in kind of a 6'7" wingy offensive guy like a Frankie Fiddler from Omaha. So yeah, there's a lot here. I think my issue with this team is I don't know if they're going to defend a lick. Like I trust Jeremy Fears to be a good defender. Carson Cooper has good defensive on-offs for Michigan State in years prior in limited run. Outside of that, Cohen Carr, I guess, can play defense because he's just so athletic, but he's not the most instinctual defender. Outside of that, I don't know if anybody on this team can play defense. So, yeah, I think that I thought Ken Pom had him like as a top 15 defense, maybe like 14th-ish. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, no way they reached that. But offense is probably a little bit better than Ken Pom's projecting.
Yeah, Ken Pom coming into the season has offense 56, defense 16. I actually might flip those.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be able to score.
Seriously.
Yeah, you mentioned the lack of 3-pointers last year. They were 324th in 3-point attempts per field goal attempt. So, bottom 50-ish in 3-pointers attempted. I like this roster a bit more than you. I do get the defensive woes, but that's more of a trusting Izzo. He consistently has top defenses. He's had defenses inside the top 50 in 15 of 20 of the last 21 years.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
So, there are teams that we talked about where, you just kind of trust that it's going to be there. And I think that I trust that he'll have them in a respectable spot. I'm higher on the offense than Ken Pom is. I think this is a really young, exciting team with what I think is arguably the breakout player in the entire conference in Jeremy Fears, 37% assist rate before the before he had to miss time last year. That would have been 14th nationally. Hopefully he's healthy out of the gate. I think he is. Surrounded by Trey Holloman, who shot 43% from 3 on limited volume with a top 300 O rating, and Jaden Akins, who had a mini breakout last year, I would say. Shot 39% from three, has the seized part. He's going to be the top usage guy on this team. I would assume, this is now his team. It's him and the three sophomores. And, they bring in a couple of freshmen. I think Fiddler is an interesting addition as kind of the Malik Hall replacement. Not going to be the defender that Hall was, but I think, from everything I've heard, probably an improvement offensively. Malik Hall just never took that step offensively that everyone thought he was going to have or going to take. So, I mean, this is just a super talented team with a Hall of Fame coach and kind of a clean slate. I think like the confluence of all that happening has me buying into the upside, at least with this roster. Any last thoughts here?
Yeah, I get that. I think really the swing piece of this team is Jaden Akins. If Jaden Akins steps into the Tyson Walker role, and it doesn't even have to be Tyson Walker, it just has to be like Tyson Walker light-ish, the team is in a much better spot. I'll to this day, I have not ever really been a Jaden Akins guy. I think he's kind of a Tyrese Proctor, just beta, like never really going to grab the bull by the horns and be that kind of number one guy. He's got to do it this year, and part of the reason why I'm down on him is because I don't really see him doing it. If he does early on in the year, I'm happy to kind of make adjustments, but going into the year, that's where I'm at with him.
Yeah, I mean, he was behind Tyson Walker, AJ Hogard, and Malik Hall in usage. So, I don't know. It just feels like a clean slate, and their non-conference outside of the Champions Classic against Kansas. They play, I think the only other team in the top 100 they play is Colorado, who has an entire new roster. So should give them time to figure things out before conference play. And they have a pretty easy start to the conference season. Ohio State, Washington, Northwestern, Penn State, the first four games. So I could see this team starting like 10 or 12-1 with obviously a loss to Kansas in there. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to Minnesota. Team that most have picked in the bottom of this conference for good reason. 19-15 last year. They end up 78th at Ken Palm. Thought they had a good season for Minnesota standards. 9-11 in conference. Hung real tight in conference behind Cam Christie, who saw playing for the Lakers last night. Elijah Hawkins was incredible for Minnesota last year as the lead point guard. Pharrell Payne transferred out. They bring in a handful of transfers, Gavin. Maybe you can touch on a few of these guys. But yeah, Tyler Cochran, I think, is probably the best pickup here. The Toledo transfer, the Husky, the Husky guard from Toledo. What do you think about the turnover here? It's basically Mike Mitchell, Dawson Garcia, and 7 new faces.
Yeah, Mitchell played off the ball last year because Elijah Hawkins was just incredible. He was the point guard next to Houston Millette, who was the shooting guard at Pepperdine. So I think going back on the ball will do him some good, even if it's not like a super full-time point guard role, because Cochran can play. He was kind of one of the two-headed monsters at Toledo with Raheem Moss. The ever old Femi Odukale comes in, his fourth school at this point, like at times going to be a streaky scorer. He's fine. He's a good piece at the high major level, back again from Pitt. We'll see.
Yeah.
Frank Mitchell is a Canisius guard, a guy who is a 6'8" elite rebounder in the MAC. The MAC, I have worries about up transferring, especially when he's not really a stretch guy. So there's issues there. When you talk about MAC guys transferring, like last year, you had Walter Clayton, Dennis Jenkins, and Nelly Jr. Joseph that were kind of in a unique spot with Iona. The fourth guy after that, like in the conference, was Noah Thomason, and he was like, whatever at Georgia.
At Georgia, yeah.
So, Lucy Patterson can play a little bit of on ball. Charlotte transfer, kind of a big body, more of a slasher, pretty decent game. But, a couple guys that can at least play on the ball. Even Femi can, score it himself, but kind of bearing the lead with, Dawson Garcia is, I think, pretty easily one of the 5 best guys in this conference. but yeah, they tied for ninth last year. In the Big Ten, 71st on Torvik projection this year, 59th on Ken Palm. I think it's actually a relatively high floor team, just given kind of the elder statesman nature of them. They got a couple guys that can play, so I think they stay off the bottom of the conference, but definitely, probably in the 12 to 14 range, probably in the conference for me.
Yeah, the issue is if Dawson Garcia gets hurt, this team is in deep shit. Ken Palm's got him, I think, 14 or 15 to start the year. Yeah. Dawson Garcia missed some time last year, but, if he stays healthy, I could see 33, 35 minutes a game, 20 and 8, something like that, with a couple of steals and blocks, 0.98 fantasy point per minute for him. The last 2 seasons, this team hasn't been great, but they've had really, really solid point guard play. Talon Cooper, Hawkins, back-to-back years. I agree with you with Mike Mitchell. I think he's poised to kind of take a jump here. Was an awesome shooter, 41% from 3. Doors kind of open for him to take over the team here. Odakale, this is year 5, I think. All 4 of his seasons that he's had been under 100 O rating. So probably a net negative there for him, even though he does produce peripherally. Frank Mitchell, I like the stats, but yeah, transferring up into a conference like this with so many good big men gives me some pause. He was 4th nationally in offensive rebound percentage, 8th nationally in defensive rebound percentage. He actually, I pulled up all of his tier A and B games. He played 4 of them last year and played well in all 4, including a double-double against Syracuse. So I think he's probably a guy to leave the light on for, just because, the rates just are so good on a team that probably doesn't have that much depth. Any other thoughts on Minnesota here? I will give
not inspiring. I don't know.
Yeah. I will give Ben Johnson some credit, in his 2 years, he improved by a full 10 wins, went from 2-17 in conference to 9-11, and offensive efficiency from 235th to 58th. I mean, those are massive improvements year over year. So
really sneaky good ATS guy as well last 3 years.
Yep. If Dawson Garcia is in there, they'll have a chance. All right. Next team here is Nebraska. Massive losses for Nebraska. I don't have Rink Mast on here because he didn't transfer out, but he is hurt and out for the season. Their hub big man. They lose Tominaga, everyone's favorite 3-point shooter. Jamarcus Lawrence, Wilcher, Josiah Alec are all gone. I think they bring in some interesting transfers here, Gav. Gavin Griffiths, your namesake from Rutgers, Braxton Mia, big man from Washington, and a season from Wisconsin who battled like a back injury, could never really get on the court last year. And then Andrew Morgan from North Dakota State, I believe. What do you think about the roster turnover? Oh, I went right over Riley Worcester from Utah, who will probably start at the point here. Actually, will definitely start at the point for Nebraska. What do you think of the roster here? They do bring back your guy, Juwan Gary, and Bryce Williams, who had just a massive breakout season last year.
Yeah, you definitely lose some shot gravity with Tominaga and Wilcher heading out. But yeah, just kind of like, what an incredible year. They tied for 3rd in the Big Ten, dude. Like literally 0 people had Nebraska finishing 3rd in the Big Ten last year. I don't care if he had a crystal ball. It was an incredible year. But yeah, if Rink Mast was healthy, I'd be much higher on this team. But now without Rink Mast, it's basically Hoiberg having to play on the fly. It was, like you said, a hub 5-centric offense. They played through Rink Mast to get a nationally ranked assist rate, even as a big man. But now you bring in a guy like Raleigh Worcester. Last year he had a bad leg injury that he missed like the back half of the year. His assist rates have been 69th and 97th nationally. So he's just an elite facilitator of offense. You mentioned Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary. Juwan Gary had the 5th best BPR in the entire Big Ten last year, which is basically an indication of on-offs compared to kind of a team's efficiency on both sides.
Yeah.
That's the second best of any returner behind Braden Smith. So yeah,
32nd nationally too. 32nd nationally.
Yeah, if he, I need to look at rink masked on offs and see what Juwan Gary did with masked off the floor, because if those are like getting big jumps, then when Mass is out, Juwan Gary's legit going to be like a 7.5 to 8K guy at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, you bring in Aaron Eulis, whatever. Andrew Morgan's the backup big to Mia, North Dakota State guy who rates ball off cliff against AB. Asijian is interesting. You mentioned a back injury. I'll tell you what back injury he sustained under Greg Gard. The reason that he didn't play last year, the only reason I can think of, is that he blew Greg Gard's wife's back out. And because he was the first Wisconsin freshman, true frosh, to average double-digit points per game since Michael Finley, right? And then all of a sudden he just doesn't even play last year because I guess AJ Storr is just so good and you can't take Klesmit off the floor instead of him. Like Asijian's going to be, there's not even big fall offs like from his true frosh year to Tominaga last year. Tominaga last year, 202 attempts, 37.6%. Asijian 2 years ago, his true frosh year, shot 192 threes at 35.9%. That's like, so that, I think that kind of alleviates some of the just kind of blowback of not having Tominaga. But yeah, I tend to think that they actually might be a little bit better than this 56 projection. I'm not going to project them to finish 30th like they did on KenPom last year and third in the Big Ten, but I am a little bit more bullish on kind of the 56th projection right now, even without Mass.
Yeah, same. I think bringing back Gary and Bryce Williams is just so huge here. Bryce Williams basically duplicated his stats across the board, going from Charlotte to the Big Ten. That is impressive. Really nice peripherals pretty much constantly for Bryce Williams, making him a good DFS play, 0.93 fantasy point per minute there. Gavin Griffiths never really got off, the ground in his freshman year at Rutgers, but, he was a former top 50 guy from last season. So, he brings some recruit pedigree to this roster. Not really sure what you're going to get with Braxton Mia besides, missing 20 games a year with random foot and leg injuries. He was primed for a big season before having to play through that injury pretty much all season. So I think the Gary Mia combo, at the 4 and 5 is at least interesting. Mia top 40 defensive rebound percentage nationally, 121 O rating the last year. I think this team's got a bit more upside than people are giving the credit for. Like you said with Raleigh, like the assist rate is there. He's not a great scorer, but he's going to get these guys involved, and I just think he's like a good winning piece. So I think the pieces fit well together. I'm not sure about the bench. They bring over the transfer from UCLA who didn't do much.
He sucks.
But yeah, I think that this team's pretty I think the biggest knock that I have on this team, even though I do like them, is that I think they're pretty thin outside their top 6.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that. The top 6 is pretty strong. Like Mia's going to be a pretty good, I imagine, drop big again. And he probably has a little bit more success in a drop coverage scheme than he did in a heavy zone Mike Hopkins scheme. So yeah, he'll be a usable 7-foot rim protector.
Yep. I think we both like that team a bit more than consensus. Let's go to Northwestern. Looks like their name got cut off a bit here on our state-of-the-art graphic. But they also had a hell of a year last year. Both them and Nebraska outpaced projections by a lot. 22-12 for Chris Collins, 41st at KenPom, 12-8 in conference, Scav. But the big thing here, right at the top left of the screen, they lose Boo Buie, their team engine last season. Ryan Langboard also played really well for them last year. They lose him. Not much turnover on this team as far as incoming pieces, though. What are your thoughts on the loss of Boo Buie and how this is, how that's going to impact this team?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Collins was on the hot seat 2 years ago. and then just ass pulled like 2 amazing years back to back. Like for the fact that this Nebraska at least had some decent on paper talent. Northwestern did not have much on paper outside of Bowie and Barnheiser, and finished third in the Big Ten. So yeah, I mean Barnheiser, God, my breakout call last year. Let me just give me a minute while I wank my shit, live on stream. God, he was freaking incredible. But I mean, Northwestern as a whole has been one of the more under the radar teams this entire offseason. Like you mentioned, not many portal gets, basically 2 guys from small mid-major Northeast schools. There's just I could make the argument that Boo Buie is a bigger loss year over year to Northwestern than Zach Edey is to Purdue. I can do that. I won't do it because we have 18 teams, but it's the best player in program history. Like what he meant for that offense in terms of creation, scoring, late game. Like how many times did they get late in the game and Boo Buie just kept hitting shot after shot after shot, and somehow they win? Like it's incredible, and you don't replace that year over year. I don't even know who plays point guard on this team. Like I don't think Jalen Leach is a Big Ten point guard. The Fairfield transfer.
Yeah. Well, you compared the loss to Edey. You probably remember the first Big Ten game of the year that went to overtime where Northwestern beat Purdue when Boo Buie went for like 30 and 10 or something like that.
Yeah, Chris Collins had the blueprint of how to play Edey. They just always own Purdue the last 2 years in their yard. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Jalen Leach is honestly a Big Ten point guard, but at least you have Ty Berry, who's just a lethal 3-point shooter. He did have the foot injury, so there's a little bit of uncertainty what he comes back as. Barnheiser is a first-team all-conference candidate. Like Nick Martinelli, he's going to play the 3-4. He's a non-shooting 3-4, which is not going to be great, but you could even argue like, do I have Nicholson's not coming back, right?
I believe he is on the team.
I got to double check that because I had in my notes that you're missing that rim protection, what he provided. So I'll double check that before the end of the show. But yeah, I just think that there's no way you replicate the last 2 years, especially when you don't have a Boo Buie coming back, best player in program history, best point guard in the conference last year. Yeah, you don't replace that at Northwestern.
Yeah, I've got Nicholson on here. Jim Root has him using his extra year on his roster sheet.
Maybe that's why I'm confused on him. Okay.
Yeah. Martinelli came on real strong down the stretch, and he was kind of forced into extra time with the injuries. He started their last 11 games. Remember we were playing him, when he started cheap because he was playing so many goddamn minutes. He played, I went back and added this up, 36.7 minutes per game in his 11 starts.
Mm-hmm.
Crushed within his minutes, 1.15 fantasy point per minute for Martinelli. Probably doesn't replicate that, given more time and usage, but so someone's going to take all these Boo Buie shots. It's not just going to be Barnheiser. I think Barnheiser is, has an outside chance at first team all conference. Will the team be good enough for him to be, he's kind of in the Dawson Garcia bucket, I think. Mega usage, counting stats are going to be awesome on a team that probably finishes in the back half of the conference. Elite rebounder for his position and size, played 90% of the team's minutes, 22nd nationally in minutes per game. Good stocks guy, nearly 3 steals and blocks per game, despite playing on a really slow team, 338th in tempo. I think he comes into the national spotlight this year. That was an awesome call on him. Last year, breaking out 0.90 fantasy point per minute at 37 minutes a game. That is a 9K player this season for me. The issue is always, you're playing a guy on a team that's in the bottom 25 in tempo. So, that's kind of all I had on this team. Last note was, this was pretty much Boo Buie driven, but 2 seasons ago, Gav, Northwestern was 282nd in 3-point percentage. They were 7th last year.
That helps, yeah.
But yeah, that's Boo Buie, that's Ty Berry, Ryan Langboard. So yeah, I think this team takes a step back. I'm with you on the question marks as far as who is going to handle the ball. Any last thoughts here for Northwestern?
Yeah, I don't have many confident takes in this conference. What I can guarantee you, there's not a top 50 team in KenPom by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think this team is back half of the conference. Probably, do they go back to Chris Collins on the hot seat? I think that could be the case. I did check out their non-con Gav. They've got Dayton the first Saturday of the season at Dayton. They play a neutral against Butler and a neutral against Georgia Tech. Are really their only 3 non-con games of any significance. So fairly easy start of the season before they probably get their asses kicked in Big Ten play. Ohio State. Let's go to Ohio State. Jake Diebler, the new head coach, 22-14. They end the season 49th last year, 9-11 in conference. Their losses include Jameson Battle, Roddy Gale, who we talked about earlier in the show, Felix Akpara, Zed Key, and Scotty Middleton, who we talked about yesterday. I really like their additions. They bring back Michi Johnson, who started his career at Ohio State, Micah Parrish, who I know you like from San Diego State, and then 2 high upside guys who were kind of log jammed, and Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw, 2 5-stars from last year from Duke and Kentucky. What are your thoughts on the offseason for Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, they keep Jake Diebler, who basically fell into what was basically favorable shooting regression. They just didn't hit shots. Like they starting 4-10 in conference with Chris Holtman, but I think you start with the Stewart Bradshaw, right? Especially, I think Bradshaw, like personally to me, how many times have we seen a Kentucky 5-star transfer out and go smash, a la Bryce Hopkins, a la Keon Brooks? This guy had a 124.2 O rating in limited run. That would have been second nationally behind Edey. Offensive rebounding percentage would have been top 150. Block percentage would have been top 150. And at least shot threes. It was only 28.6 from 3, but at least shows that upside. And then Sean Stewart, like I think he's like a 6'9", just I think mega athlete who's going to be relatively limited on the offensive end, but is going to be a terror defensively. So this front court, I think just by accident can fall into being a good defensive front court. You bring back one of the 3 to 5, best point guards in the conference in Bruce Thornton. You bring in a Quez Glover who, I don't think Quez Glover's all that great. Maybe he provides some impact bench punch after sitting out from K-State. So, yeah, they got about, 7, 8 guys, I think, that are pretty strong. I think the question with this team is really how much do you trust Diebler to be able to mesh the pieces that he has and get the most out of them? That, I think, is still up for debate. I don't really know where I stand on Diebler. I'm kind of leaning towards I'm not feeling great about him long term. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. I get the shooting luck, but they had 1 top 75 win prior to the coaching change. They had 5 in like 8 or 9 games after it. I'm willing to give him a chance. I mean, he clearly put together a good roster, right? That's more than we can say about a lot of the teams and a lot of the coaches that we have talked about. I mean, he put together a roster with upside. You talked about Bradshaw, Sean Stewart, top 25 guy from last year, chose Duke over Ohio State last year, comes to Ohio State now. He was logjam behind Mark Mitchell and a guy named Kyle Filipowski at Duke. Bruce Thornton, you mentioned 118th nationally in BPR on Evan Mia. That was tops on Ohio State last year. 121 O rating, bumped up from his freshman year, 4.8 to 1.2 assist to
4 to 1.
turnover.
Best of any power conference player in the nation. I looked it up.
Yep. Bruce Thornton was awesome last year, shot 85% from the line. I think playing next to an established, now veteran guard who I think has kind of gone and figured it out at South Carolina in Michi Johnson, I think is going to be much, much better than a ball hog in Roddy Gale, who, the ball kind of died in his hands a lot last year. I've talked about it on the first two shows. I trust teams with upside and experienced backcourts, and I think it clearly they have that here in Thornton and Michi Johnson, paired with a good defensive wing, a good connective piece in Micah Parrish. So you have a experienced, steady, really good backcourt with a good defender on the wing who, it's not a great shooter, but they're probably not going to need him to shoot or score on this team. And then two mega upside front court players. I really like this team. I was kind of bummed to see that both Torvik and Ken Pom had them in their top 40. I think this team's going to finish top 5 in the conference. I really do. Now, if the coach is the reason that they're held back, then so be it. But at least he's gone and shown that he can put together a roster that fits, that complements itself, and that has upside in this conference.
Yeah, I think the big thing, like Michi is a very different player than Roddy Gale, right? Roddy Gale was 28.2% from 3 on 103 attempts. And like you said, the ball died in his hands. Michi, 32%. Not great, but, that's fine. That's not killing you on 187 threes. So that just even gives more spacing to guys like Thornton for driving lanes. I think that also alleviates some of the uniqueness that you lose with Jamison Battle being like a 99th percentile 3-point shooter at the power forward spot. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like on paper. Kind of just comes down to the coaching me, like I said.
Yep. I think this team's going to have multiple ways to beat you on any given night. I think that there's something to say about that, with a long 20-game conference schedule now. I peeked at their non-con, pretty tough. They open the season. This game will be on the slate, Gav. Ohio State against Texas on a neutral. They play Texas A&M in mid-November. They've got a home against Pitt, and neutral against Auburn, and a neutral against Kentucky. So pretty loaded non-con for Ohio State. We will know early on them. Next team up, Oregon, one of the new faces of the conference here. 24-12 last year, but finished 55th at Ken Pom, 12-8 in conference. Some turnover here. They lose their star player in Fali Dante and Jermaine Cousinard, their second leading scorer. A couple other departures that are less meaningful. They bring in TJ Bamba from Villanova, who, we talked about him yesterday, was pretty misused there at Nova. Brandon Angel, stretch 4, Raheem Moss from Toledo, and Supreme Cook, some front court depth. What do you think about Oregon coming to the Big Ten and the loss of Dante and who they brought in?
Yeah, I think in a conference that lacks upside, kind of where you're at with Ohio State, I've really grown on this Oregon team, kind of the closer that we get to tip. You finished 4th in the Pac-12, you won a tourney game, and you lose in double overtime to Creighton in the second round. This team was dangerous at the end. It obviously was coming very heavily through Jermaine Cousinard and N'Faly Dante, who were not there. This team was also massively banged up injury-wise last year. Dante only played 21 and a half games. Shellstad missed 4. Bartholomew missed half the year. Nate Biddle only played 5 games total. It was a disaster on the health front. They were top 25 from March 9th on. They got better kind of as, a Dana Altman team does. And you return, a true Frosh point guard who's now a sophomore with really great 3-point range and good facilitation abilities, even though he was kind of more score first. TJ Bamba was like a first team all Pac-12 guy 2 years ago. So that's, bringing in real pop. Brandon Angel was a super effective offensive player efficiency wise at Stanford, comes in. And then Kwame Evans is still, I think a really unheralded kind of high end, probably a better NBA guy than he's going to be in college, but this is like a 6'9" guy with kind of small forward abilities as a good rebounder and an elite Hakeem rate, which is steals plus blocks. So there's a lot to like. Raheem Moss, I thought, was better than Cochran. He's more of a rim challenger than he is really a 3-point guy. So I think he fits well next to a Bamba, next to a Shellstad. But the thing about this team that I think is really the unlock is if Nate Biddle just finally stays healthy. Man, there's some terrifying upside with him if he does in this conference. And I think what people won't say about it that you can't see from the stats is that the Big Ten is a mega drop coverage conference because of the big man centric, really true 5 center nature of the conference. So a lot of teams play drop. The fact that we're playing like Eric Dixon 3 props every game that he plays Creighton and he keeps just cashing it because of that drop coverage. That's the thing that Nate Biddle can provide is like the 3-point upside. He's a rim protector. He would have nationally rated O ratings, rebounding rates, block percentage. Like he's just got to stay healthy, especially now with Supreme Cook being out with what sounds like for a while with a knee injury. Gets a little bit thinner in the front court, which makes you nervous with kind of what's happened in recent years. But I think kind of 1 through 4, like this team is really solid. And then if you get a healthy Biddle, I think this team is really scary upside wise.
Yeah, so Torvik's got them 44th, Ken Palm 29th. The concerns I have from this team, I do think that they've got a ton of talent. Obviously, Shellstad is being billed as an all-conference guy, kind of out of the gate. I think that's a bit early for him. He wasn't great last season. Everyone said that he had some elite season. I think he had a good season.
Also came into the year hurt and missed the first couple games. So I think that's, true freshman starting out hurt. I'll give him kind of a pass for that, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, when we look at the kind of the watch list for the all conference team in this conference, he would have to have a crazy year to make that team. So, good pedigree. The upside is there, but 0.68 fantasy point per minute as a freshman, that's pretty middling. I understand that that is not, a direct correlation to like how he's playing, but it does give you a good idea of how someone impacts the game. I think people are really just looking at his scoring when, they're talking about him being, having an elite year as a freshman. I just don't buy that as much as others. The Nate Biddle thing, I think it's such a double-edged sword, right? Because the upside is gnarly if he is able to stay on the court. 1.16 fantasy point per minute when he was healthy. My question, Gav, what do they do when he gets hurt? Because he's going to get hurt at some point. Like you said, Cook is down behind him. I don't see who else can, because Angel and Kwame Evans are more, stretch fours. I just don't see what they do at the 5 if Biddle goes down. Like, I guess Altman can just kind of deal with it and plug holes kind of like he did last year, but he doesn't have the insurance behind him that he did last year. I don't know. That's mainly my concerns here is that Shellstad isn't a superstar and Biddle, probably their biggest upside swing piece, played 5 games last year with, no real backup behind him.
Yeah, I get that. If that happens, if you get kind of not great improvement from Shellstad, Biddle gets hurt. I don't have an issue with running Kwame Evans at the 5. Like, you'll give up physicality on the defensive side, banging with some of like the guys like Ballo. But he's also another guy that can shoot threes. It wasn't the highest volume, but he definitely has an ability to do that. And if it improves, he's also going to put bigs in a tough spot. So I think he is kind of the answer at the 5. But you have insurance if Barthélemy comes back. He's a defensive guy. Moss can play on the ball. There's a lot of options. So even at the worst case scenario, I think back end of the top of the conference, call that 6th to 8th-ish.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of there too. I do like the TJ Bamba pick. He just seems like, an improvement from Kuznard, kind of the same type of guy, but a better player, I think, than Kuznard. So yeah, no, I do see the upside. I'm just seeing this team picked 1st, 2nd, 3rd in the conference, and I can't quite get there. Any other thoughts on Oregon?
Nope.
All right, Penn State. Penn State, 16 and 17 last year, 77th is where they ended up at Ken Palm. I thought a pretty good year for Mike Rhodes there. 9 and 11 in conference. Man, I feel like every single team that we've reviewed has been 10 and 10, 9 11, 11 and 9. Penn State loses Kanye Clary, and Wahab is gone as well. They bring in an interesting transfer from Tennessee, Gav, who I know you're going to cover. But other than that, not much roster turnover. They were able to bring back Ace Baldwin. I think that was a huge win. You know, I kind of expected him to go start at a bigger program after the insane year that he had last year. But, I guess when you're given the keys to a team in a major conference and they're like, hey, go play all 40 minutes and take as many shots as you want, no real reason to leave, I guess.
Yeah, we'll talk about another guy that's been just been basically on a leash with his coach for the last multitude of years, 3-4 years. Ace Baldwin is that to Mike Rhodes, so he stays. He is, for my money, the best two-way point guard in the conference over Braden Smith, just because of what he brings defensively. Penn State's also a really weird scout in the Big 12, given their press rate at like a 93rd percentile frequency. So, yeah, you're going to catch teams kind of off guard some given nights just on the short prep. But, yeah, even with that, they're projected currently 61st on Ken Palm. Man, like I don't even I'll be more bullish on Freddie DeLeon, who is kind of he's a little bit bigger than a Zakai Ziegler, but there's a lot of similarities kind of between them in terms of 3-point ability, but also thrives as a slasher and can play make a little bit out of that. He's a Tennessee transfer, but he's going to go from literally a 5-minute role into probably at minimum a 28-minute per game role. But there's just not much to like upside wise on this team. Like, in a conference of 18 teams, I don't think this is one we got to spend a ton of time on, because I think it's pretty safely bottom 4 of the conference. And DFS is going to be straightforward. It's going to be Ace Baldwin. And then after that, it's going to be without a misprice. We're probably going to be off them.
Yeah, Ace, he will be on that list that we show later of the all conference watch list. DeLeon, like you mentioned, former top 50 guy from Tennessee, have to think, right, that he was given some sort of guarantee that, he's starting at the 2. He's going to be able to jack up as many shots as you want, and he's going to play a bunch. So I like him. He'll probably be super cheap early on, I would imagine, for us in daily fantasy. I think there's a bottom 3 team, though, in the conference. Just taking a peek at their non-con real quick. Super easy. Their toughest game in non-con is a neutral against Virginia Tech. So it can really ease into the season. We probably won't see them on many slates before conference play. Purdue is up next. Purdue losing the championship game, 34-5. They end up 3rd at Ken Palm, 17-3 in conference. We finally get out of this 9-11, 10-10. Gav, we got 17-3 Purdue last year. Absolute ridiculous team. Biggest loss, back-to-back National Player of the Year. Zach Edey actually making his debut like right now, I think, in the NBA. They also lose Lance Jones. Mason Gillis transferred out. And mercifully, Ethan Morton is gone, Gav.
Thank God.
This team, I was trying to find, they did not bring in any transfers. They are one of 2 high major teams to not bring in a single transfer in the portal. We talked about the other one yesterday in Marquette. What do you think about the loss of Edey, of Lance Jones? A big transitional year here for Purdue. A lot of people think that they cannot sustain success. What do you think?
I mean, we talked about kind of the schematic change with Nebraska. Purdue is probably the team ahead of that with the largest schematic change for a returning coach. Playing completely around Edey made everybody's else lives easier. That being said, when you return you're the guy that's been preaching backcourt, right? I mean, Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, like, yeah, we kind of meme Fletcher Lawyer a little bit. Guy's still just a dead eye shooter. And, supposedly he's coming in a little bit bigger, like 15, 20 pounds heavier to be better defensively. Well, that remains to be seen. I actually think like Braden Smith is probably the only true lock to be on the Big Ten first team. I would say maybe a second guy, but that we'll talk later. But I'm just going to be nuking his points props early. They better be in the 20s because like he's going to be scoring so much for this team. You have Miles Colvin and Cam Heide, who were kind of the freshmen last year in very small roles with good pedigree. Can Heide play that stretch four? I think that kind of unlocks a little bit more ceiling. He was very mega efficient in a limited role. Colvin's going to be kind of more your spot up shooter, but like other than Edey, like Lance Jones and Mason Gillis were probably the two unheralded guys of the team last year with what Jones brought stability wise, spot up shooting wise. With Gillis shooting 47% from three at the four means you can just play 4-round-1 with a generational center, like maybe the best college center that we've ever seen, most dominant.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a huge change. So the team's going to look different. You have a Trey Kaufman-Renn at center who can stretch a little bit more, who's going to be a good rebounder who has, in spots where Edey is fouled, which was really rare last year. It was a little bit more frequent 2 years ago after Trevion Williams left. And Trey Kaufman-Renn had some good spots. So I think he's a really, big breakout candidate in this. And then you bring in, this 7'4" Daniel Jacobson. We'll see. I don't know. I think he's getting a little bit more hype just with size and being at Purdue. But Jakari Harris is receiving pub as like a potential major minute getter as a 75th overall recruit. That doesn't make me feel great about Purdue. So I hate the ceiling of this team, but man, I have a really hard time seeing this team outside of the top four in the conference. Like I think Painters finished top 25 in Ken Palm, like the last, double digit years, 10 years or something like that. So yeah, I think no ceiling pretty safely, probably 15 to 25.
Yeah. The depth on this team is a bit of a concern outside the top six. Like you said, it's Smith, Lawyer, Colvin, Heide, Kaufman-Renn, Caleb Furst. Behind that is basically 5 freshmen. So the depth is a bit of a concern, but he doesn't play that deep of a bench. I do like the top 6 a lot. You mentioned Braden Smith, number 6 overall player in the country last year on Evan Mia. So this team had the number 1 and the number 6 player, up to 34 minutes a game. We did see him, cede some minutes in blowouts, but I don't know. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do that as much this year because, they don't have a guy scoring 30 in the first half against the shit teams. So, yeah, I mean, Braden Smith, just elite player. People get on his ass, but, man, 43% from 3, led the conference in assists per game, 11th nationally in assist percentage. You're freeing up 34% of possessions here. So, like you said, the scoring is going to go way up. He only averaged 12 a game last year, but 6
He's going to
rebounds.
average 18. I'm telling you, 18 points a game for Braden Smith this year. Book it.
Yep. Lawyer, like you said, also gets dogged a bit. I wish Virginia Tech had a guy who shot 45% from 3. That's our 2 guard that people were making fun of. I think Colvin and Heide are the swing pieces here. Colvin brings much needed athleticism to this roster, kind of fits in that Lance Jones role. Was a top 75 guy last year. Shot 41% from deep on limited attempts. So a better shooter than Lance Jones. Lance Jones, more of a, attacking the rim scorer. You mentioned Camden Heide. His rates are insane. 136.6 O rating in very limited run, obviously. Zach Edey had a 128 O rating last year. 45% from 3, 69% from 2 was top 10 nationally. His effective field goal percentage would have been top 10 nationally if he qualified. I think this is the swing piece here, Gav. Stretch 4, stepping into a much bigger role here. So I think this team, we know exactly what we're getting from Smith and Lawyer. I think the Colvin, Heide, Renn Kaufman Wren is, what will make this team either 20 to 25th or, 10 that Ken Palm has. Because I do think that is the ceiling if these guys hit. Clearly, like the with the O ratings across the board on this team, the ceiling is, I think, to be a top 10 or 12 team. They do have a tough ass non-con. How about this for the second Friday of the season, home against Bama? That'll be a fun one. They play NC State, Texas A&M, and Auburn on a neutral right around Christmas. Any other thoughts on Purdue?
Yeah, I mean, Braden Smith averaged nearly 6 boards a game with Edey on the floor. I mean, are we discounting him for Player of the Year?
I mean, I think the assists will go, like the counting assists, I think will go down just because
he won't have 3 freebies a game.
Right. But like an 18, 7 and 5 or 7 and 6, something like that on a team that could be top 10.
At like 80 to 1. I don't know. I'm going to think about it, but
I mean, you did just say that he's basically the only lock for first team all conference. So, yeah, I'm into it. And then my last note here, Zach Edey is the best of the bunch, but Painter has replaced top level talent recently. Swanigan, Isaac Haas, Travion Williams, Jaden Ivey,
Carson Edwards.
Yeah, he's not new to this. The replacements have always come from in-house. I think that there are guys on this roster that can become those next stars in Heidi Colvin, much like Braden Smith is. All right, let's go to everyone's darling team in the conference, the one that everyone's excited about, Rutgers. 15 and 17 last year, 100th at Ken Palm, among the worst teams in the conference in Ken Palm at the end of the season. 7 and 13 in conference. Mass evacuation. Basically, I'm not going to read off the list, but everyone besides Jeremiah Williams and Jermichael Davis are gone. The big one being Big Cliff transferring to Bama. We'll talk about him next week. They bring in 2 of the top 3 overall recruits. Just really, really cool. A unique situation in both college hoops and definitely at Rutgers, bringing in Dylan Harper, the combo guard, and Ace Bailey, the big man. What are your thoughts on the 2 of them and, kind of their fit and the just Rutgers as a whole?
Yeah, I don't even think we touch on losses because it all stems around the 2 freshmen. I saw enough in the scrimmage, dude. Like, I think St. John's is a team that is a stone lock top 10 defense in the country this year.
Rutgers?
And no.
Rutgers they played St. John's. Right.
Yeah. And I could not have been more impressed with Dylan Harper as a point guard. The level of control he has over the game, the bag he has under every different situation of duress that he was placed under, the shot making, the penetration ability, the facilitation. God, he's good. Like, the floor he's going to be the night to night consistent guy for Rutgers. Then you get to Ace Bailey, which, like Sam Vecini kind of said it perfectly, had the exact thoughts I had. Like, you saw the entire Ace Bailey experiment. Like, he airballed 2 shots in a row. I think he airballed 3 total. He also, I mean, I'm not going to, he's not Kevin Durant, but he is the closest package to Kevin Durant that we have seen in college basketball since him. It is a terrifying skills. He looks like Jabari Smith on the floor, frame wise, really tall, really slender, good looking, very calm shooting stroke. But man, I mean, he has playmaking ability. He would just take some of the most WTF shots and the no, oh my God, it went in shots. Like, any given night, he's going to be like the best GPP play all season, every given game. If he's low owned, you just play him, because any given game he can go, it's 13 to 20 from the field with a multitude of rebounds, stocks, and a couple assists, or he can go 3 of 15. it's going to be an up and down experience with him. But I'm not even a big freshman guy usually coming into the year. I need to see it first, but boy, these guys are as billed as advertised to the T. Like it's scary. So the ceiling is there, but the floor is also really low. I think them and Illinois are the two teams with the widest ranges of outcome in the conference, as indicated by Torvik's 19th ranking and Ken Palm's 63rd. It's got to be one of the largest spreads for any power conference team, I'd imagine.
Yeah, Ken Palm's got Rutgers 17th out of 18 teams projected in this conference. They have him second worst, below Penn State, below Minnesota. I'm not quite there just because of the upside of this team. But yeah, I mean, playing two freshmen in a league that is full of 21 and 22-year-olds, I could absolutely see it going bad. Now, the question is, Gab, how much can they improve offensively from last year? Because it was embarrassing. 298th in adjusted offensive efficiency. Really good defensive team, as always, under Peichel. Yeah, I mean, this team is clearly going to go where the two Frosh take them. They do bring back Jeremiah Williams, who really impressed. He was the leading scorer on the team last year. Not really a shooter, but, after missing the first 20-ish games of the season, he did close the season strong. So I do like that he gives them kind of a third option. I'm not sure what they're going to do with the 5, but I'm not really sure it matters. I think the defense is going to be good, and then however Harper and Bailey play is kind of how this team's going to go.
I mean, they made Zuby Ejiofor look like prime Andre Drummond. Like it was terrifying how bad on the interior they were. But yeah, the supporting cast with Jeremiah Williams, Tyson Acuff is a proven multi-year scorer. He's more of a high volume guy than a high efficiency guy, but that could sway as the non-main option. The only guy that I feel good about carving out a real role on this team is Jordan Durkak. Merrimack transferred, and now, the NEC, I just kind of bashed on guys moving up a conference. Durkak just does so much for this team that when you have two freshmen that are so offensively minded, he's going to carve out a role as he was the defensive player of the year in the NEC. He was the player of the year. He was creating legit stocks. I think Durkak is going to carve out a 28 to 30 minute role. Other than that, it's going to be pick and choose game to game between Acuff, Martini, and Jamichael Davis, I think.
Yep. Really excited to see how this team plays. We probably won't see them much the first couple weeks, but that week in Vegas, Gav, they'll play Notre Dame, Bama, and Houston. So we'll find out. We'll find out Thanksgiving week where Rutgers is on the national scale. Let's go to UCLA. Obviously entering the conference after just an atrocious year, 16 and 17, 98 to Ken Palm. They actually somehow went 10 and 10 in conference, Gav. I don't know how. Basically because everyone else went 10 and 10 besides
because the Pac-12 was shit.
Yeah. So why don't you take this one over, because you did the team page on this. They lose Adem Bona, and that's about it from impactful pieces. And he basically hit the eject button on the roster and went with an entirely new makeup around Dylan Andrews and Sebastian Mack.
Yeah, I mean, he was cussing the team out once a week in post-game press conferences. It was a terrifyingly bad year for not just UCLA as a program, but Mick Cronin as a coach himself. I mean, if you look back at the last, since 2011, Mick Cronin's average defensive efficiency ranking is 25th. If you remove the COVID year, it's 16.7. If you remove last year and the COVID year, it's 13.7. So I trust him on the defensive side. Now, the team that he brings in is an extremely deep team. When your 9th or 10th guy is, I'm not saying Ademar is anything special, because my God, was he miserable last year. But when he's your 9th or 10th guy and you have that kind of level of an upside swing in the team, there's some inherent depth involved. Now, it's kind of like a Kentucky where there's a lot of guys. I don't know if there's any dudes on this team. You bring back Sebastian Mack, a downhill guy as a freshman. He had toe injuries throughout the year, which I can't imagine are good. But he's going to be a good two-way off-ball guard, getting to the rim. Dylan Andrews is going to be like a steadying pace. He's kind of Tyler Campbell light. He's not going to win you games. He's not going to lose you games in the role he's going to play this year, which is much different than last year in the score first role. Kobe Johnson, I mean, he's getting like first team all conference hub. Like, I don't know if anybody on this team plays more than 32 minutes. Kobe Johnson is one of the best wing defenders in the entire country, bar none. But he had, the keys to the kingdom last year when Collier was hurt, when Boogie was hurt, and the 3-point percentage dropped, the O rating dropped. So I don't feel great about that, but I do feel good about his defense. Bilodeau had a surprising year. Tyler Bilodeau at Oregon State, really efficient offensive wise, was also like the second worst defensive BPR on Evan Mia on a really bad team, which is bad. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like. Eric Daly and Sky Clark, right? These are kind of two of the other transfers. Like Sky Clark started, went 1 for 7, made me think, boy, we're back to Sky Clark things. But yeah, he's an upside piece. He's not going to have the role that he had at Louisville, but maybe efficiency upticks coming back home in a more confined role. And then I think like Eric Daly's one of the more interesting swings of the team. Like he could be kind of the guy that determines like ultimately what this ceiling looks like, because I think there's real upside for him to be the number one guy on this team, especially both ways. Former top 40 recruit, nationally ranked rebounder, especially elite positionally. He showed a growing 3-point game. Like if he has a 3-point game that improves, he's going to be, I think, their best player. But there's definitely some projection involved in that. So ultimately, I think just the accumulation of talent with a Mick Cronin means that I feel good about the floor for this team. But when they're the odds-on favorite to win or tied for the odds-on favorite to win on a couple different betting sites to win the conference, that I'm not there yet. But I do kind of agree with the 24th and 26th Bart Torvik and Ken Palm projection of kind of where they're slated at. I think a team that hovers around the top 25 all year.
Yeah, I mean, just have to like this roster a lot more than last year. It's deep. I mean, it goes 10 deep, like you said. Cronin, as we know, is not afraid to give people roles and then staple people to the bench. I think the one thing I could see is, you have 10 guys here who probably are expecting roles on this team. Like the number 9 guy, I think right now could easily be like Sky Clark, who didn't transfer to UCLA to play 5 minutes a game. So I think role allocation will be super important on this team. It's, it's basically all new faces outside the top 3, and he didn't bring in like bit pieces. The guys he brought in played 31, 29.8, 27.7, 22.3, and 31.8 minutes a game last year at their stops. And it's not like they're coming from Canisius. They're coming from power conferences. So I think that's probably my biggest concern. I'm sure that he'll find a way to make it work because he's a great coach. And he clearly did this on purpose. So I'm expecting, the offense to bounce back. It's going to be a top 30 defense. The 152 offensive efficiency last year, just embarrassing. I expect top 50 this year with this roster. I think it's going to be good. This is the team, Gav, that I really was hoping that people would be low on, and I was going to be higher on then, but it's just harder to be higher than 25 on this team. Taking a quick peek at their non-con, they only play New Mexico before conference play. New Mexico, their only team inside the top 200 before conference play, but then it looks like the Big Ten's doing like a couple games and then a break around finals. Instead of a break around finals, guess what UCLA is doing? They're playing a neutral against Arizona, a neutral against North Carolina, and a neutral against Gonzaga, right in the middle of conference play. So that'll be interesting. We probably won't really see them challenged until early December. Any other thoughts here on UCLA?
Easiest projected conference schedule by Bart Torvik. So if we think other than those 3 non-cons, it's pretty easy schedule wise, then yeah, I think, UCLA has some upside. I just don't see it winning the conference, but I think pretty safely kind of 2nd to 5th for me.
Yeah, I do think the floor of this team is going to be good. There's just so many proven contributors that it's hard to believe that he won't find a mix that works. All right, let's go to your squad, Southern Cal. Hey, there's a bunch of good things that happened in the offseason. But last year, 15 and 18, 85th at Ken Palm, 8 and 12. Coach is gone. Muss is in town. He ejects the entire roster. Um, I didn't put the entire roster as the key losses. I actually listed them all. Good for me. So you'll see here on the sheet who is gone. It's basically the entire team. And then he brings in 10, 12 transfers. Why don't you take this over, Gav?
Yeah, it's the biggest portal get was Eric Musselman getting rid of Andy Enfield. So I guess I shouldn't be too mad about that. But seems kind of Dusty Mayish in that first year you bring in a lot of high floor guys just to kind of get things going more in the right direction. It's basically a mid-major all-star team with Desmond Claude and Terrence Williams. It's one of the more unique teams. I don't even think in the conference. I think in the country, just given the positionless nature that they're probably going to be operating within. Like Desmond Claude is expected to play on the ball. St. Thomas, Northern Colorado transfer, who was one of the breakout guys in the nation, going from Loyola Chicago in a 20% season minutes roll rate to conference player of the year, and having really similar rates across the board, to Dalton Connect. I'm not saying he's Dalton Connect, but he's got some pretty interesting playmaking upside as kind of a point forward in a secondary handler role. Chibuzo Ogbo, 6'7", Boise State transfer, elite defensively, legit back-to-back 40% three-point shooting years off mega volume. So that's the kind of guy that's going to fit anywhere. He even has a little bit of post-up ability just at his size. Josh Cohen from UMass. I worry about him at the Big Ten. I kind of thought he was a little over expectation at UMass, but was also highly productive. I think the last kind of piece to really highlight is Matt Noling. This is a Yale transfer, a guy that 2 years ago, before he started battling injuries, was the preseason Ivy League Player of the Year, I believe ahead of Jordan Dingle, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
With the year that he had as a true freshman, but he's like a 6'6" version of Danny Wolf, where he kind of can play just even a set shot shooting guard. He can also play even a small ball hub five for the team. So this team is much more like the Eric Musselman teams of Nevada, where they were very positionless, they were very high skill, and he was just mismatch hunting the entire time, because any single guy that your center who can't guard in space switches onto from the multitude of ball screens that he's run, or that they run with Musselman, is going to be put in a terrible spot, and that's how he's going to attack. 50 and 57 for Torvik and Ken Palm ranking. I want to think it's a little bit better than that, but that honestly, if I'm being unbiased, might even be a little bit optimistic. I kind of see more in the 60 to 75 range, I think, when it's all said and done. Just on a first year, even if I'm long on, obviously, the Musselman hire in LA.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with going any lower, right, is all of these teams are top 75. So every conference win is going to kind of buoy you in the rankings, because you're not going to be taking losses to teams that are ranked outside the top 100. I like the roster. I think it's the most extreme rebuild in the entire sport. I think it's cool. He's going to have an absolute field day, Gavin, trying to figure out what works. And the good thing for us is we aren't going to have to deal with it for the first 2 months, because they don't play anybody in the non-conference. Have you looked at USC's non-con? Here,
no, I'm glad they don't play anybody.
Actually, they do play St. Mary's. It looks like on Thanksgiving. So without St. Mary's, they play Chattanooga, Idaho State, UT Arlington, Cal, San Jose State, Grambling, Montana State, CSUN, and Southern.
It's going to be terrible when I flip on St. Mary's USC on Thanksgiving when my family wants to watch the Cowboys and Lions.
So, but I actually kind of like it. It'll give him time to figure stuff out. He can play around. We know that he's a notorious tinkerer with lineups. But I do think that the talent is here on this team. Like Ken Palm's got them below Northwestern and Nebraska and Wisconsin. I'm not buying that. I'm not really buying that. So, any last words on your squad here?
There's way more talent than Northwestern. I think DFS wise, like the only three guys that I can really trust to have major roles are Claude, Thomas, and Agbo. After that, it gets pretty sketchy. It's probably Nolan fourth, and then maybe Cohen fifth. But yeah, we know how Musselman is the first couple months of the year. Hopefully he figures out the lineup sooner than later because, yeah, when he's even more positionless than he has been in Arkansas in years past and the lineups have already been a mess, it could be just night to night, such a shit show.
Yep. All right, let's go to another team with a new coach, Washington. They bring in Danny Sprinkle from Utah State. Good year last year for Washington, I think. 17-15, but ended up 60th at Ken Palm. I thought they had a chance to kind of break through and make the tournament, but couldn't get it done with Keon Brooks and Severe Wheeler. Big losses there with their top two players, Moses Wood and Paul McKay, Corin Johnson, Braxton Mia, also gone. But they bring in, a top recruit, Zoom Diallo, who's going to start at point guard, I think, and Great Osabor, player of the year in his conference last year. DJ Davis, we talked about how big of a loss he was for Butler on the Big East show yesterday. And Tyler Harris from Portland, I think, is an interesting pickup as well. What do you think about Washington's moves? Tell us a little bit about Danny Sprinkle as well.
Yeah, Danny Sprinkle just pretty much wins everywhere he goes. Last year was the best year that the Mountain West Conference maybe has ever had. They had six bids in the Mountain West, and he won it with a team with 0% returning minutes, which is incredible. They went 101 to 51 in Ken Palm. Basically every year that Sprinkle has coached at Division I level between Montana State and Utah State, the teams that finished significantly better than they have started in Ken Palm. It's basically about like an average of 41 and a half spots per year in Ken Palm every single year that he coaches, which is just unheard of. He also doesn't have Darius Brown last year, his point guard at Utah State that, came over from Montana State with him and was a sixth-year guy. Now he's relying on a four-star true Frost guard, which definitely makes it sketchy. Osabor is, the guy who's just like Ace Baldwin following Mike Rhodes. He's following Danny Sprinkle everywhere. So he's probably one of the most live guys for first team all conference, but in the same bucket as Barnheiser and Dawson Garcia. Great counting stats on a crap team. It's how do you basically value that? DJ Davis, I think, gives you some insurance to having a true Frost guard. Like his O rating was top 25 in the Big East. He also had a top 25 assist rate. He's basically the best free throw shooter in the nation. I think it was like 96 of 98 or something ridiculous, but
95 of 100.
Yeah, that's pretty good. While being 34% from three as a guy mostly creating himself. I don't love the Makai Mason pickup, honestly. He was part of the two-headed monster at Rice alongside Travis Evie, and he was the significantly less efficient guy. O rating even went down to a 96 against like tier A, or 93 against tier A and B, which kind of gets pretty ugly. So we'll see. I just like program wise, you can't make a bigger trade up from Mike Hopkins to Danny Sprinkle, even going from an Enfield to Musselman. But I'm also a big Tyler Harris guy. I just think that the front court is super jammed in front of him. Like if Kepman comes back, he's one of the most productive guys. He doesn't shoot. Osabor doesn't shoot. So you already get really clunky at the 4-5 and guys you have to play. So Harris probably a year away, but a guy that I'd love long-term.
Yeah. You didn't even mention that Sprinkle was able to retain Wilhelm Gogglesbach, key piece to the
must have gotten a big NIL check.
a big returning player there. No, I think that this roster is pretty good. I don't think it's the worst in the conference. I think Northwestern is worse than this. The Zoom Diallo, I've heard good things about him overall. You note here, he has the upside to be a good two-way player, good facilitator. I think bringing Osabor over is definitely interesting. I'm not entirely buying the first team all conference in the Big Ten type of upside, but just a rock solid player that was already in his system, and he's going to play big minutes and be reliable. So DJ Davis, like you said, I think it was a huge pickup, a huge loss for Butler. I think he'd bring some stability to that backcourt with the uncertainty of Diallo, to kind of balance that out. So they have a good top three there, and the bench is at least solid. Like it's guys who have played big minutes before. It's not and they're pretty old outside of Diallo and Harris. I think everyone else besides Diallo and Harris is a senior or a grad student that is going to be playing major minutes. So I actually kind of like this roster. As far as a back end Big Ten team, I think that they'll challenge for closer to like the 12 to 15 range than people think. I've basically seen them universally picked as 18th as the last place team in the conference. They'll have a couple shots in non-con. They play Nevada and Colorado State before Thanksgiving, so they'll be on a couple slates. They play Nevada that first Saturday, Gav, on the road. That'll be a tough test. Any other thoughts here on Washington?
Yeah, like if you gave me a bet, minus 110 to finish last in the conference both ways, yes or no, I'd definitely pick the no. Like you give me a coach with Danny Sprinkle, with guys like a great Osborne, guys like a DJ Davis, Frank Kepning, if he comes back healthy, there's the depth is pretty good. We didn't even mention Chris Conway, who won the tourney game as a part of Oakland, also played next to a non-shooting big in Trey Townsend. So it's not totally foreign for him. He's just super steady, like bench piece. This is a better roster with, I don't know. I think Danny Sprinkle is easily as good as Chris Collins, definitely on a better development curve. So I'm gonna say Washington not to finish last in the conference. I'm kind of with you there.
Yep, same. All right, let's go to our last team. We're pacing under 2 hours. Look at us.
I hope Barrick's sitting down for this one because it ain't gonna be pretty.
Yeah, Wisconsin last year somehow finished 17th at KenPom. Another one of those teams, just like Sparty, that he just always kind of seems to be over market on, and I think overcorrected. Well, not overcorrected, but we see a big correction in the projection this year as I'm 60 or 46 to start the year. They go 11-9 in conference after a bit of a shaky start to conference play, a bit of a shaky ending to conference play. They kind of stumbled down the stretch after the hot start. Yeah, they started 8-1 in conference and ended up 11-9. Had that backwards. Major losses here. Kind of program cornerstone Tyler Wall is gone. AJ Storr, one of the best transfer portal pickups in the country last year, kind of carried them at least for the first couple of months. I think he kind of faded down the stretch, Gav, in the increased minutes and role. He is gone. What do you think about those two losses? They don't really bring in much in the portal.
Yeah, I mean, Wall was, part of the, like, Wisconsin prides themselves on walling up around the rim, all pun intended, and just making you shoot over him. Wall was, he at least had some playmaking shots at the four. He wasn't really a shooter, but that's tough. But, you cannot overstate the bailout that AJ Storr gave this team. For them to finish as the 17th best offense in the nation is incredible. And it wasn't like he lit the world on fire efficiency wise. It was a good enough efficiency at his volume that he was just a better option than literally anybody else shooting the ball on the team. And so they go to the Big Ten tourney championship. I think they lose to Illinois, right? Or do they beat? I can't remember. They go to the tourney championship, then they
lost to Illinois.
Then they lose to James Madison, kind of relatively predictably, as the trendy underdog pick. But yeah, this team is ugly. At least he gets back Stephen Crowell. He's kind of in a similar bucket as the Dawson Garcias, the Barnheisers, but he doesn't have really the counting stats, I don't think, to back it up. But he kind of is that to this team in terms of what those guys are to their respective teams. Klesmit is like, yeah, sure, he's a usable small forward, 3-point shooter, gives you minimally peripherally and gives you almost nothing defensively. You bring in a Cameron Hunter, who I think sat out all last year for Central Arkansas, like wasn't a Sun freshman of the year. scored 16 and a half points a game prior to the year that he was injured. But yeah, there's a lot of projection in that. John Tonji sat out all last year, but was usable at Colorado State as the non-Isaiah Stevens, always open option. But I think the one kind of guy really to harp on here is John Blackwell. Like, Blackwell can step into that. AJ Storr, he had a very high nationally ranked O rating in limited run, but at least gives, like, this is the only hope for really true shot creation, I think, on this team. Like, unless Hunter and Taji come back full health and are even better than their old selves. But at least Blackwell already showed it in the Big Ten. So I feel good about, like, him being kind of, I don't even know if it's a tier 1 breakout, because 18 and a half minutes, 8 points a game, like, tier 1 breakout from that would be like, 16 at a 30+ minute roll, basically what Storr was to them last year. So I think he's kind of on I think the more I think about it, the second tier of breakouts, but I think definitely a guy we need to have our eye on early.
Yeah, I think this team is their ceiling is pretty tied to John Blackwell's progression. Shot 45% from three, backed up by 82% free throw shooting off the bench last year. Good O rating. They need him to make a huge jump. Wasn't a top recruit, though. Wasn't even a top 200 recruit, which actually surprised me. Crowell is going to be who their offense is focused around. Played almost 30 minutes a game. Has started every game last 3 seasons. 104 straight starts for Crowell. Just the absolute rock of this program. Took a step back volume-wise last year with Storr. But man, Gavin, he shot 44.8% from three last year.
He shot really well from far two the year prior, but didn't shoot well from three, and then shot extremely efficiently well from three last year, which I think is interesting to note progression and improvement was.
Yeah, 120.6 O rating. I think this is the DFS guy for sure, because I think the usage will just flow right back to him here, and they are going to need him to have a big scoring. He only scored 11.2 points per game last year. I think the points per game for Crowell takes a big jump here. They are starting Nolan Winter at the 4 is the current rumblings. Back-end top 100 recruit last season. Stretch 4, played behind Tyler Wall last year, so didn't get much run. But, I guess he brings some upside to a roster that doesn't have, much recruiting pedigree or upside in general on their roster. So kind of monitor him out of the gate. I put a funny note about him in chat. As a 6'10 guy, had one block in 339 minutes all of last season. I think this is, Gav, I think this team is more of the Wisconsin from 2 years ago that finished 61st than last year that finished 17th. I think I'm lower than both Torvik and Ken Pom on this team. I think back third of the conference is probably where I'm at here. And then DFS wise, it's just tough because 8 of the last 9 seasons outside the top 300 in tempo for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, if the more I look at it and think about it, like if Winter is billed as a stretch, if he's really a stretch 4, plus you bring in Xavier Amos from Northern Illinois, who was also a stretch 4, and you start playing a 4-round 1 with Crowell, and Crowell just shot, over 40% from 3, like there is 5-out opportunity, I guess, on the team, which makes it interesting. But I'm really kind of starting to pick at, how can the guys reach the ceiling? I don't think they do, because there's just lacking talent in a mega deep conference.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think there's any prayer that this is a top 50 team, and it's ranked 41st on Torvik and 46 on KenPom. If Greg Gard does, then I will apologize to Greg Gard, because I was familiar with this game, but I just didn't pay attention to it. But I don't see it on this team.
Yeah, quick peek of their non-con. They host Arizona second Friday of the season. They got a neutral against UCF. They're at Marquette in early December, and they have a neutral against Butler. So a couple tough games there, along with some early December conference games, which seems to be the theme for the Big Ten. They have a couple conference games, then break for finals. All right, let's wrap up here with what we usually do. Let's look at some accolades. This was, this is the third show that we've done. We've had 5 to 6 guys on the, all conference watch list, if you will. I have 10 guys on this list. They aren't really in any order. I just kind of went guards through to the big men. Braden Smith, Ace Baldwin, Bruce Thornton, the 2 Rutgers Frosh, Peyton Sandfort, Brooks Barnheiser, Dawson Garcia, Umar Ballo, Julian Reese. Do you want to highlight any of those guys or add any to the list there, Gav?
Yeah, I tried my best to narrow it down to 5 guys because it's so hard to do. And yeah, like
it's
you mentioned, the watch list is tough. I think where I ended up is Braden Smith is the lock. I think the next lock is Umar Ballo, just with the role that he's going to get in another good paced offense. Then it went to Ace Baldwin. I went Ace over Dawson over Barnheiser in this spot because I think when you're mid-teens points per game you're going to be one of the leading assist guys in the conference as the best point of attack defender. Like even if Penn State's bad, I think it's the counting stats just are too tough to ignore. So I went Braden Ballo, Baldwin with Sandfort, 16 and a half now without Tony Perkins, probably pushes 18, maybe even 19, 20 points a game in that offense. And then I ended up going Dawson Garcia. I went freshman second team. I think that Harper doesn't have the consistently nuclear ceiling games that the other guys have on the first team. And Ace is so inconsistent night to night that he doesn't reach a high enough average. So that's basically where I shook out on all those guys.
Disrespecting your guy, Barnheiser. Unbelievable. I was not expecting that from you.
I know. It's just that team is so bad, and he doesn't have Boo Booey anymore. That's going to change so much of what he means on scouts to other teams and stuff. So,
yeah, no, I think Barnheiser and Garcia are kind of in the same boat, right? Like bad team, but mega usage guys.
Barnheiser is going to be a great catch play because he's literally always on the floor, and he's going to take a shit ton of shots. He's going to put up good stock. So just play him and catch every night.
Yeah, breakout players here. I got John Blackwell on here from Wisconsin. And then a couple like combos. Like Purdue, I have Kaufman Wren and Cam Heide. Sparty, it's the guards, right? Fears, Holloman. And then we added Xavier Booker. Like at least one of those guys is going to be a breakout player. I'm hoping it's all 3 because I'm super high on Sparty this year. Brock Harding, I think, is a really underrated one. Probably a guy that not that many people know of coming into the season. I put Sam Walters here, but you talked me into changing that to Trey Donaldson just because he's just going to be on the court a lot more than Walters. And then the 2 Ohio State guys, Aaron Bradshaw and Sean Stewart, I think are clear breakout guys. And Ohio State is going to need them to break out to be as good as I think that team's ceiling can be. Any thoughts there and any guys that I missed? I think you wanted, yeah.
I think, when we're talking breakout in a conference this deep, I mean, the true guys at the highest breakout level in this conference will be guys that go from single digit minute roles in their previous stops to being 26 to 28 plus minute major contributors on their team. So there's a couple guys that stand out for me. We mentioned Bradshaw, the 2-way aspect of him. Like, I think like with a nuclear ceiling for that guy, DFS wise, if he's getting 28 minutes a night, that's one. We mentioned Brock Harding under the radar, like, with kind of what he provided in a single digit minute role. If he steps into 28 minutes, like he could be kind of the semi Jordan Bohannon, like of years prior. You don't need to be super good to be Jordan Bohannon. You just need to be steady. And then the other guy was the Freddie DeLeon. Actually, you know what? I lied. There's a 4th because this is my breakout guy of the conference, and it is Nate Biddle. And if he gets injured, then I can just blame it on injury, and I'm totally like have repented for the pick, and I can take no ill feelings towards it. But just with what he can provide, 3-point range, like I said, in a drop coverage conference as a rim protector with elite rebounding rates. It really is scary to think about what could happen if Nate Biddle stays healthy the entire year for Oregon.
Yeah, I like that one too. We had this done before we added a couple guys at the end and made changes. So Yeah, this was a fun show. We did all 18 teams. If you missed part of it, you can rewind. We went in alphabetical order.
2 hours, 18 teams is less than 7 minutes a team. I think that's not half bad.
I know, and it was less time than we did with the ACC for an even better conference. So we're getting better at this. We're finding our groove. We'll be back next week. We got the two best conferences in the country to talk about. We got the SEC and the Big 12. Stay tuned for when we're going to schedule those. At least one of them will be next Tuesday night. Not sure about the other one. If you missed the ACC show or the Big East show, they are live on the Run Pure Sports YouTube as well. Just scroll down and find them, or they're on my Twitter at Steve Boynton VT. I've got them pinned on my Twitter account. Gav, we will talk next week. We'll go through the SEC and the Big 12. For Gav, I'm Steve. We'll see you next time.